Welcome to the Do No Harm podcast, where we discuss the battle to keep politics out of medicine. With our hosts, Dr. Marilyn Singleton and Do No Harm's founder, Dr. Stanley Goldfarb. Together, we're talking with people to create a better healthcare system for all, one that's based on medicine, not division.
Our guest today is a Kansas lawmaker with a simple and powerful message. Gender transitions for children are child abuse. Representative Ron Bryce sponsored a bill in the Kansas House that would prohibit gender transitions to anyone under 18 years. Representative Bryce believes the procedures are unsafe, unproven, and unethical for kids. And he knows a thing or two on this subject because Representative Bryce is also Dr. Bryce. He's treated more than 100,000 patients throughout his career, overseeing a level 1 trauma center, family medicine residency program, and a large ambulatory care center. Plus, he served 6 years on the Texas Medical Board. All that before moving back to his hometown of Coffeyville, Kansas, and being elected to the Kansas House of Representatives. Dr. Bryce's original bill, protecting minors from dangerous gender ideology, was rolled into a piece of legislation called Senate Bill 233, and it's been hotly debated in the legislature ever since. And you can imagine why. We are thrilled that Dr. Bryce is here today to give us an update on where these things stand. Okay, thank you so much for coming on the show today, Dr. Bryce.
Well, thank you, Marilyn. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm honored to be with you.
Well, let's let Dr. Goldfarb get things going.
Thank you very much, Marilyn, and thank you, Dr. Bryce, Representative Dr. Bryce, for coming on the program and informing our listeners about this. Let's jump right into it. Why don't you tell us what your bill proposes and what the opposition to it has been? So we'll let you sort of lay that all out for us.
Right. The bill is approaches the subject of gender dysphoria and what the most appropriate treatment is for that in children, those who are under 18 years of age. The bill that we have passed through the House, and we're waiting to see what the governor does, but it basically prohibits what I would call mutilation surgery or transgender surgery under the age of 18, as well as puberty blocking drugs and opposite sex hormones. The reason I think this is important is we had a similar bill about a year ago, and we missed passing it by one vote on the veto override. But since that time, the last 12, 18 months, there's been a lot more data that have become available. I think at the time last year, we were given the idea that if we tried to take away gender affirming care with surgery, cross-sex hormones, and puberty blockers, then we were killing transgender children. And that was constantly thrown in our face that it sounds kind of odd and it's not immediately understandable, but what they were saying is transgender kids have a high rate of suicide. And if we take away these surgeries and hormones and puberty blockers, we are promoting them killing themselves. And there will be a large number of transgender children under the age of 18 that die. And this was constantly thrown out at us. Even on the House floor, there were people on the other side who would stand up and yell at us that we were killing trans kids. And you know, nobody wants to hurt children. We all go into this thing wanting to be helpful. And so at the time, I think that was enough of an influence that we lost a couple of votes and we were not able to override the governor's veto. It was a very narrow margin. But this time around, I think it's different because there is experience now, especially in Western European countries, Northern European countries, United Kingdom, that show that these treatments with surgery of the genitalia and breasts, the cross-sex hormones or opposite sex hormones, and the puberty blockers, they don't do anything appreciable to reduce the suicide risk in these transgender, or I would say gender dysphoric young people. What it is, Dr. Goldfarb, is the kids that we're talking about often have concomitant or psychiatric illnesses. A lot of them have depression, anxiety. They're on the autism spectrum. And so when they're dealing with the anxiety and the issues associated with gender dysphoria, they also have these other psychiatric problems that are classified in DSM-5, which is the what we use to classify psychiatric illnesses. And so what we found through these studies in Western and Northern Europe and Great Britain is it's very clear now that if you give these children support, have them supportive therapy, and you treat the underlying psychiatric problems like anxiety and depression, then these kids, for lack of better terminology, they outgrow it. So they're confused about their gender and they're 8, 10, 11 years old. If you just support them and treat any underlying psychiatric problems, 85% on average will outgrow their gender dysphoria. And that's an amazing number to me. And that's really a game changer when we found out that there are 11 different studies that have been done that have shown that one study was 87.8% outgrew their gender dysphoria by the time they reached the end of adolescence. And so what really bothers me about what's been going on with these kids is they're being kind of captured when they're confused, they're young. That what's going on in their head doesn't match what they see in their body, and they're gullible, for lack of better terminology, to these transgender activists pushing them into life-changing, life-altering, horrific treatments. And so since we have data that's actually scientific available now, we were able to push this on the House floor about a week and a half ago, and we passed it 80-40, which with the representatives who are missing, we need an 84 vote in order to override a veto, and we expect a veto. But to override the veto, we believe we have 4 of the missing legislators at that vote will be available. And so we think we'll have no room to spare, but we should have a majority to override that veto. But it's really something that's long been due because so many of these kids are just suffering, and we don't need to give them treatments that have been shown in these studies to not decrease suicide. Now, what happens in America through the different surveys and opinion polls and the Trevor Project and different things, they ask transgender dysphoric children whether they feel better after treatment or this and that. It's very subjective. It's an opinion poll. That's not objective. Now we have objective data. There absolutely is not an increase in suicide if you limit these treatment modalities for these kids. And so it's very clear. If we care about the children, if we care about these kids that are suffering with gender dysphoria, it's a social contagion that's just out of control nowadays in social media and so forth. And unbelievably, I believe 70% of these children are female. The statistics are phenomenal. 25% of young people now consider themselves some LGBTQ variant. This social contagion is not treated scientifically and well if we use surgery on their bodies, puberty blockers, which basically castrate them chemically, or opposite sex hormones. Those just cause harm. They do not cause anything to be treated appropriately. And so my position as a practicing physician is we do no harm, and I appreciate the name of the podcast and the name of the group, Do No Harm. And that's really what we're promoting here. And we hope that the governor will sign this bill. We anticipate because of previous actions, she will not, but in the House, I believe we can override the veto. And in the Senate, it's close, but possibly we can override the veto and we can outlaw these treatments. Now, it's not for adults. It's anyone under 18. And that's something that we also need to keep in mind. We're saying if you're 18 or older, if you can basically smoke and drink and drive a car and serve in the military, if you reach that age, whatever it is, you can take care of your own body. But these kids aren't even allowed to get a tattoo, or a body piercing. And we're telling them, we will mutilate their genitalia, cut off the breasts of a young lady, castration chemicals. It's just totally bizarre in my point of view. And from a a physician's perspective, I think this bill is greatly, greatly needed. I'm very happy to be one of the people carrying this and debating this, and I'm just I feel very, very good about it.
That's great.
Well,
Tell us, if I can just follow up, Marilyn, could you just tell us what exactly the bill will do? What will there be penalties for physicians, or will there be other consequences of this if they engage in these activities?
Right, I'd be happy to do that. The bill prohibits any entity, any organization in the state that accepts state funds from promoting these transgender treatments. It prohibits a healthcare provider, basically a physician or a nurse, from doing these treatments at the risk of a civil action or at the risk of losing their license. It also prohibits malpractice insurance for these treatments. It provides for a 10-year time window where the parents can bring the cause of action for these treatments, and from the age of 18 for 10 years for the patient to bring this cause of action in case there is damage done from these procedures. And there was a lot of debate about that. The initial bill had 30-year statute of limitations. We amended the bill. We did try to make the bill better, and we tried to, where we could find some kind of a consensus or common ground, we tried to get everyone involved, but we did reduce the statute of limitations from 30 years to 10 years, and that seemed appropriate with this kind of treatment.
What about the medical licensure and having the physician be censured or somehow lose his license if, in fact, he performs these procedures? Is that a problem when you're kind of redefining a standard of care, when you have the pediatric organizations and the psychiatry organizations saying it is the standard of care? So how do you kind of square that?
Well, in the bill, we did have some amended language, but we ended up with the language that says the licensing entity shall do what's appropriate for that particular case. And so we left a little bit of leeway as the Physician Licensing Board, which is the Kansas Board of Healing Arts, or the Nursing Board, but they shall do what's appropriate, but we left them some leeway and decided, the licensure board's deciding exactly what is appropriate for the individual case. And as far as the opposition to this bill, let me just be perfectly honest. I was shocked by who is against this. And there are pediatric organizations, there are family practice organizations. Now, there are medical organizations that were proponents, but it shocked me that a lot of these organizations were not representing what the data say. They were not representing even what their members were saying. They were representing what I would call a political ideology that will have it no other way, but that these children will be, little boy's body turn into a little girl's body, vice versa. That's their whole agenda. You can approach them with data, you can approach them with reason, but there's something about the ideology that I haven't figured out, that they just seem immune the data, to logic. And so we did our best. I did my best to talk with the people, talk with people from medical centers that are doing this sort of thing, trying to get some consensus, but there's very little common ground. And it's very difficult for me to wrap my head around how these healthcare organizations take these positions. I know and just on a personal note, several years ago, I dropped out of the AMA, and for this kind of a reason. They were taking such a leftist track that they no longer represented me. And I did a little research about a week ago, and there are less than 10% of Kansas physicians that are members of the AMA. And I think a lot of that is because they have been, I'll say, co-opted by a political agenda, and the majority of their members are just dropping out because there's no reasoning to it.
Tell us a little bit about how the insurance companies play into this, because we can certainly see the malpractice, the power of the malpractice component of this bill that will, I think, put the fear into practitioners who are embarking on treatments as you described them, and we certainly agree with that the data doesn't support it. Will the insurance companies back them up in this, or do you think that's going to be another way that's going to put pressure on performance of these activities?
We didn't hear anything that I know of from any of the insurance companies. I know, of course, the CanCare, which is Kansas Medicaid, they will be prohibited from doing any of these things by statute. We did not have a proponent or opponent testimony from the insurance companies. I would be interested in knowing their take on it, but I think with the data the way it is, and with several states, 20-something states, I believe at last count, passing this legislation, I think payment for those kind of services is going to be called into question from the standpoint of these insurance companies, and they'll probably be backing off of it. But again, I don't believe any insurance agencies or conferees were available for pitching in on this, and I'm not sure exactly why they didn't, other than they're just kind of waiting to see how it plays out.
Now, you were saying that you thought your governor would veto this bill assuming that it passed the Senate and the House.
Yes, that's right.
And so what's the process there? What kind of majority do you need in order to override the veto?
Okay. Yeah, I'm always an optimist by nature. And so I hope against hope that she will sign the bill. But if last year was any indication, and the things that her office has said this time around, I don't believe she will. This bill passed 80-40 in the House. If we override a veto, it will require a 2/3 majority. We have, and not to talk about a lot of numbers, but we have 125 total in the House. We believe 84 votes is what we have now. So if she vetoes it, it'll come back to the House. We will vote, hopefully pass it. The Senate has 40 members. They need 27 to be 2/3 majority. So hopefully they will do it also. I believe they had a solid, from what I understand, they had a solid 26 votes. A 27th vote, I believe, was secured by attaching amendment to it, which allowed for an off-ramp, what I call an off-ramp, for these children who are on these hormones and puberty blockers to have a 9-month period of weaning off of them. And so it seemed less harsh. And I can go along with that. Instead of cold turkey on day one, no more. They have, and who knows how long is the appropriate length of time, but the consensus was 9 months to allow them to come down off of these medications. And so it's hoped that we'll have the 27 in the Senate, the 2/3, so that we can override with 2/3 in both houses. And then the governor's veto will be canceled, and the bill will become law. And that's what we hope and pray for.
I have one question to ask about the governor. What are the reasons? What's the, has she come out and stated why she believes that gender surgery and hormone replacement and all this nonsense should go on with minors? What's her rationale?
I haven't heard her directly. I've heard people speaking from her team and the Democratic members of the legislature, and it seems to be what they have placed a lot of their hopes on is claiming that we are killing transgender people by not allowing them to have these treatments. And that's been the mantra. I mean, day in and day out. In the committee meetings, we've had to, we had 5 people ejected from the committee hearing on this before it went to the full House. The chairwoman of the committee actually broke her gavel, gaveling people down. So it was a very energetic interaction. But a lot of the opponents who are supposedly on the governor's side use outdated information, use opinion polls, and this really bothers me. They use a marketing kind of thing and telling half truths, instead of giving all the details, all these studies that have been done all over the world in the last 12, 18 months particularly, that are clear and definitive that these treatments are not effective. But it's a political agenda. It's a political mindset. And I can't wrap my mind around how they would want to do this to these children when there's no efficacy. In other words, there's no positive effect. The safety profile is horrific. When the FDA approves a procedure or a medication, the FDA looks at two different things. Efficacy, in other words, is it effective in solving some problem? Number two, safety. Is it safe? Does it have side effects? Does it have long-term effects? These gender-affirming care treatments are neither efficacious or safe. And so the only way that I can see someone would support these things is if it's a political belief system rather than science. And I hate to try and get into people's minds and say why they think things, but that's the best I can do to estimate it.
So you're really one of us. Marilyn and I are both physicians. You're a physician. And the idea, I think, for either of us to sort of be effective in this political world that you're now in must be really quite challenging. So what's this been like for you as a physician to become aware of the way politicians think about things and horse trading that goes on and so on? Let me just say, first of all, it has been a delight to be part of the process. It's been very difficult at times, but it's a delight to just, it's like going to a basketball game. I used to play basketball. When you're on the court and you're participating, it's a completely different game from the people in the stands that are eating popcorn and watching the game. And so I feel like instead of being a spectator, I'm able to be a participant. And even though it's difficult, the topics that we discuss, the issues we discuss, and then the way I approach it, and I'll just give a little background to myself. I'm a family practice physician. I've practiced mostly in emergency medicine over many, many years. I'm a problem solver. And of course, we as physicians, almost all of us go into it to help people. We want to help solve people's problems. We want to help make people's lives better. And I feel like as a freshman legislator, I'm able to extend what I've done now that I'm semi-retired from medicine. I'm able to extend that and actually help people solve other problems and help people's lives be better through these political machinations of the legislature. And I would really encourage physicians that might be listening to get involved. It's not, it's like marriage. You don't know, you can read books about it, but until you do it, you don't know. It's kind of like that, just jump in there, get both feet in there, because it really is rewarding to see what you can do for so many people through these issues. And as a physician, let me just say this, I'm not blowing my own horn here, but because I'm a physician, and we have 3 physicians in the house right now, which is unusual, but because I am a physician, people look to me, even though I'm a freshman, they look to my opinion. They ask my opinion. There's just something about being a medical doctor that people think more highly, in a sense. And so that's been very rewarding too. And I don't mind getting in there and just kind of getting my hands dirty on these issues. To me, I love interacting with people. I love the issues. And if I can stand up for what I believe in, if I can make people's lives a little better, I am all in. And so I would encourage anyone who's a physician, particularly listening, that wants to get involved with politics, go for it, because it really can be rewarding. And I had a very negative view actually going into it. I thought, well, it's my duty. I'm going to show my children, how you have civic duty. And it's just, kind of a grudgingly going into it. But once I got here, it is so rewarding to deal with these issues and to deal with people. So I hope that's helpful. Yeah. I get the feeling we haven't heard the last of Representative Royce, Dr. Royce, even on the national stage. I certainly hope so, because you've cut a very impressive figure for us today, I think. Well, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here, and I'm very grateful.
Well, thanks again for coming on the show. And as Dr. Goldfarb said, and I, as a fellow physician who did run for office, I didn't win, but I ran. It's a lot of work, and so we really appreciate that you did it, and we need so many strong voices like yours out there in the public square. So thanks for all you do, and thanks for coming on our show.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And I'd like to thank everyone for listening, and thanks for supporting our efforts to protect patients, physicians, and healthcare itself from divisive ideology. Please visit us at donoharmmedicine.org. Thanks again for listening.